I held his hands once. Now I can't forget the feeling. Not his hands exactly. Mine. Her hands. The memory keeps replaying, like the faint hum of a machine I can't switch off. I remember the warmth, the unexpected firmness, the way her fingers lingered just a fraction too long before letting go. I was supposed to be fixing the display case at the bookstore, but the moment everything else disappeared, it was just us. It's a little place tucked between an old cafe and a laundromat, with tall wooden shelves leaning a little too heavily under stacks of novels, the smell of paper and dust thick in the air. She moves through it like she owns the world, but carries it lightly, the kind of confidence that doesn't shout. It just exists, quietly daring anyone to notice. I watched her arrange a pile of returned books on the counter, sleeves rolled up to reveal pale skin marked with faint, almost invisible scars, and I wondered about the stories behind them. Her eyes caught mine when I dropped the screwdriver. She didn't laugh. She tilted her head, the faintest smirk tugging at one corner of her mouth. "You okay there?" she asked, her voice low, careful, but something in it made my stomach tighten. There was a rhythm to the way she spoke, deliberate, measured, and yet something teasing underneath that I couldn't place. I nodded, muttering something that sounded like words but probably wasn't. She crouched down to hand me the tool, and our fingers brushed. A flicker, sharp and sudden, ran up my arm. I swallowed, trying to act normal, though normal had fled the moment her hand touched mine. She pulled back, her expression unchanged, but I could swear she felt it too, the tiny electric thread connecting us that neither of us acknowledged out loud. She straightened, dusting her hands on her apron, and I caught the way she paused for just a heartbeat, scanning the shelves, pretending she hadn't noticed me staring at her the way I shouldn't. Her hair caught the light from the window behind her, golden strands softening the edges of her jaw, and I had to turn away before she caught me completely off guard. There was something in her, a calm that wasn't cold, a certainty that wasn't arrogance, that made me both nervous and impossibly curious. I kept thinking about how her laugh might sound, how she would hold a cup of coffee, how she would move through a city street that wasn't lined with bookshelves and dust motes. I realized I wanted to see her in all those moments I couldn't yet imagine. She glanced at me again, this time while she sorted through the new arrivals, her fingers brushing the spines with deliberate gentleness. I wanted to ask her 100 questions, but instead I just lingered near the counter, pretending to tighten screws I didn't really need to. Every small movement felt magnified, every glance loaded, every pause between words a kind of quiet torture. And then she looked up at me, right in the middle of a sentence I'd barely started, and smiled. Not a full, easy smile, but one that hinted at amusement and something more, a recognition, maybe, that she knew exactly what she was doing to me without saying it. My heart thudded in a way I wasn't prepared for, and I realized, with a mixture of awe and panic, that I was already too far gone. I left the store that evening with a bag of nothing but the memory of her touch, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in my jacket, and a single thought looping endlessly in my mind. I held her hands once, and I can't stop thinking about it. I found myself back at the bookstore 2 afternoons later, ostensibly to finish the display case I'd been repairing. Really, I think I was looking for any excuse to see her again. The shop smelled warmer than usual, like sunlight hitting old pages and dust settling in lazy swirls. She was there, kneeling on the floor with a stack of unsorted novels beside her, brow furrowed in concentration. I knelt down beside her, careful not to break the rhythm of her movements. "Need a hand?" I asked, though my own heart felt like it was twisting just from being near her. She glanced at me quickly, like she hadn't quite decided whether to dismiss me or let me in. "Only if you don't mind the mess," she said, a little too briskly, and turned back to the pile. Her voice carried that same careful cadence, measured and controlled, but I noticed the tiny tremor in her fingers as she stacked the books. We worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the scrape of books against the wooden floor and the occasional soft sigh from her. I watched her hands, the way her knuckles whitened slightly when she gripped a heavy hardcover, the way she rearranged them with deliberate gentleness, almost apologetically. She laughed quietly at one of the titles she pulled from the pile, a sound that startled me because it was so fleeting, so intimate, like a secret I wasn't supposed to hear, but couldn't help catching. I tried to match her pace, pretending I was helping, but really I was memorizing the way she moved, the slight crease at the corner of her eyes when she smiled, the faint tension in her shoulders that suggested a long day behind her calm demeanor. She looked tired, more than she let on, and I wanted, without knowing why, to brush the hair out of her face, to ease some invisible weight. You always work this hard?" I asked, finally, breaking the silence, trying not to let my voice betray the nervousness coiling in my chest. She paused, a stack of books clutched in her arms, and her eyes flicked toward me. There was a hesitation there, a vulnerability she didn't usually show. "Someone has to," she murmured, voice softer than before, almost like she was confiding in me by accident. Then she shook her head slightly, as if to shake off the intimacy of the moment. "But don't let me stop you from your work." I nodded, pretending to adjust a shelf, but my gaze kept returning to her. There was a pull I couldn't name, an invisible thread that hummed between us. When our hands brushed again, this time over the edge of a book, I felt the same sharp electricity as the first time, only slower, deeper, charged with something unspoken. She glanced up at me again, eyes briefly locking with mine, and I swear there was a flicker there, something hesitant, almost pleading, that disappeared the moment I tried to hold it. She smiled again, a ghost of warmth that barely touched her lips, and returned to her task, leaving me with my own thudding heartbeat and 100 questions I didn't dare ask. I wanted to linger, to stay in that quiet, charged space a little longer, but I knew she would retreat if I did. Still, as I straightened, brushing invisible dust from my knees, I couldn't stop thinking about the way her hand had lingered on the book, the way her laugh had broken through her careful mask, and the faint tremor that hinted at the person she allowed only for a moment. And then she looked up once more, just for a heartbeat, and our eyes met again. It was a soft, fleeting glance, but it felt heavy, like the quietest invitation or the quietest warning. Either way, I couldn't forget it. The rain had started softly, tapping against the windows, and by the time I arrived at the bookstore, it had grown into a steady drumbeat. She was alone, leaning over a ledger behind the counter, the dim lamplight casting long shadows across her face. The shop smelled of wet pavement and old paper, a strangely intimate combination. I stepped inside, shedding my jacket and feeling the chill cling to my sleeves. "Storm's picking up," I said, trying for casual, though my stomach twisted the moment she looked up. She nodded without speaking, eyes flicking to the window, then back to the ledger. Her hair had loosened slightly from its usual tidy twist, a few strands falling across her face. I wanted to reach up and brush them back, wanted to do so badly that it surprised me. I didn't. We worked side by side in silence, counting inventory and checking off orders. At some point, my elbow brushed hers as we both reached for the same stack of books. We froze, fingers nearly touching, and I could feel the electricity radiating from that small, accidental closeness. She glanced at me, eyes soft but guarded, and I caught a faint exhale she didn't intend me to notice. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I straightened a pile of books, pretending to measure the distance between us, though it felt like we were sitting on the edge of some invisible line neither of us dared cross. Her shoulders were tense, the faintest tremor in her hand as she set down a hardcover. I knew that tremor. It was the same one from before, the one that said she wanted connection but was afraid to ask for it. Then her phone buzzed sharply on the counter. She glanced at the screen, an expression flickering across her features, hesitation, annoyance, something unspoken. She let out a soft sigh and stepped away to take it, whispering, "I'll be right back," over her shoulder. The moment she left, I realized how empty the space felt, how much weight her presence carried even in her absence. When she returned, she leaned close to hand me a stack of receipts, and our hands brushed once more. Just once, but the brush lingered. I felt my pulse spike and knew she felt it too, though she didn't speak. Her eyes searched mine for something, I couldn't tell if it was reassurance or restraint, and the pause stretched unbearably long. A car honked outside, sharp against the rain, and she pulled back, clearing her throat as if to punctuate the moment that had almost happened. My chest ached with restraint. Every instinct screamed to close the distance, to speak the words I had rehearsed endlessly in my head, but I didn't. She was a wall I didn't want to climb yet, delicate and strong all at once. I stood behind her for a moment longer, watching her straighten, feeling the lingering warmth of our brief touches. Then I took a step back, careful to hide the way my hand twitched, the way my heart still hammered. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me, quiet, intense, unspoken. She smiled faintly, just the edges of her lips, and went back to her ledger. I lingered, wondering if I had imagined the sparks, or if they had been real. Either way, I knew one thing. Something had shifted between us, and neither of us would speak of it tonight. I left the store with rain dripping down my collar, a single, sharp thought echoing in my mind. I wanted to reach for her again, wanted to, but didn't. I found her in the back corner of the bookstore, the late afternoon light slanting through the windows, dust motes floating like tiny specters. The shop was empty, quiet enough that I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. She was perched on a ladder, rearranging the top shelf, but when she noticed me, she didn't step down. She just leaned there, arms crossed, shoulders tense, like she was bracing herself for something she didn't want to admit. I swallowed and approached slowly. "Hey," I said, trying for casual again, but my voice sounded hollow in the silence. She didn't respond at first. Her gaze lingered on mine, searching, calculating, and I realized she was waiting for me to say something I didn't know how to voice. Finally, she let out a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. "Do you ever wonder what we're doing?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I froze, trying to parse what she meant. Not about the books, not about the repairs, but us. The tension that had been simmering between us, the stolen touches, the lingering looks, the moments charged with something neither of us could name. I started, but the words trailed off. There was no script for this. How do you explain that your chest tightens at a glance, that your thoughts keep circling someone you shouldn't? She climbed down slowly, keeping her eyes on me, but not moving any closer. I don't know if this is real, or if it's just me imagining things because I'm too tired to think straight. Her voice wavered slightly, though she tried to keep it steady. I wanted to reach for her, to say something that might ease the knot in both our chests, but I couldn't. Instead, I just nodded, feeling my throat tighten. I think maybe it's real. Maybe it isn't. I just know that I can't stop noticing. She let the silence stretch between us, letting the words hang, unspoken, like fragile glass suspended in the air. The way her hands rested lightly on the edge of the counter, the way her eyes avoided looking down, the faint tremor in her jaw. It all said more than words ever could. "I don't want to ruin anything," she admitted finally, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But I also don't want to pretend like I don't feel something." Her words were devastating in their honesty. They weren't romantic. They weren't confessions of love, but they carried the weight of everything we'd been ignoring. And I realized, suddenly, that the tension wasn't just between us. It was inside her, inside me, pressing relentlessly against every careful boundary we'd built. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I just stood there, letting the quiet wrap around us, feeling the impossible pull of a connection that could change everything or destroy it. She took a small step back, eyes glimmering with unspilled tears. "I'm not sure I can do this," she said, barely audible, and her hand brushed against the shelf as if to steady herself. "Not like this, not with all the questions I can't answer." And in that silence, in that moment, I felt the raw edge of everything unsaid, everything forbidden, everything poised on the cusp of breaking. I realized with a jolt that I couldn't leave her without knowing what she truly felt. But I didn't ask. I just watched her, heart hammering, and whispered to myself, though she couldn't hear it, "I don't think I can do this either." I went back to the bookstore later that week, the air inside heavy with rain lingering outside. She was behind the counter, flipping through a worn photo album she'd apparently pulled from a drawer. I didn't want to intrude, but I couldn't stop myself from looking over her shoulder. "Those are old," I said, nodding toward a black and white photograph of a man smiling beside her, his arm draped casually around her shoulder. She glanced at me, a small, almost shy smile tugging at the corners of her lips. And for a moment I saw her differently. Not the confident, untouchable woman I'd been nervously orbiting, but someone who had loved and lost, someone who carried it quietly inside her. "He was a long time ago," she said softly, tracing the edge of the photo with her finger. "I thought I'd moved on, but some days that still hits me, out of nowhere." I hesitated, unsure if I should speak. I can't imagine. I mean, losing someone like that," my voice faltered. I wasn't trying to make it about me. I just wanted her to know that I saw her. Truly saw her. The way you only see someone when they let their guard slip. She nodded, her eyes distant, her hands lingering on the pages. "It was sudden," she said. "He left, not in the way people do. Just gone. And it's funny, I thought grief had limits, but it doesn't. It stretches and shifts, even years later." I swallowed, my own chest tightening. I think people who notice those little things, the quiet ones who linger in memory, they stay with us longer than we expect. My words felt clumsy, but I hoped they reached her. For a while, we just looked at the album together. Rain streaked the windows, tapping a soft, irregular rhythm that seemed to match my pulse. I noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, the way her jaw tightened, the faint catch in her breath when she turned a page. Each small movement spoke louder than any sentence could. "You remind me a little of him," she said suddenly, not looking at me. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Not in who you are, but the way you notice things, the way you care. It's unsettling." I froze, a shiver running through me. I didn't know if that was a compliment, a warning, or something I wasn't ready to hear. I don't mean to." She shook her head, stopping me. "No, it's okay. I don't think I've let anyone get this close in a long time." She finally looked at me, eyes wide but not accusing, vulnerable. And in that moment, something shifted, not suddenly, not dramatically, but subtly, seismic in its quiet way. I realized she wasn't just the woman I'd admired from afar. She was someone who had been hurt, who had lived through pain I couldn't begin to imagine. And yet here she was, letting me into a corner of her world I hadn't earned, hadn't expected to see. The photo fell open to a blank page, and I noticed her fingers linger there, hesitant, almost afraid. My own hands twitched, wanting to reach out, wanting to bridge some of the space between us. And then she looked up at me, eyes glimmering with a quiet, fragile honesty, and whispered, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." I didn't answer. I just nodded, because I couldn't think of a word that wouldn't shatter the delicate, trembling world between us. I just stood there, and for the first time, I felt like I could see her, not just the confident mask, but the person she had been, the person she was now, and maybe, the person she could let me know someday. I found her sitting at the small reading nook near the back of the store, the afternoon light fading into gold and gray. The rain had stopped, leaving the windows streaked and soft. She looked up when I entered, a faint smile tugging at her lips, and for the first time, the usual tension between us felt lighter, not broken, not resolved entirely, but acknowledged. I didn't speak immediately. I just came to stand beside her, letting my presence settle in the quiet. She shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, and I noticed the way her fingers traced the edge of the worn armchair. I wanted to say something profound, but the words dissolved in my throat. Instead, I lowered myself into the chair across from her. We didn't need to speak. The space between us was charged, but in a steady, calm way. No urgency, no pretense, just the slow recognition of everything we'd tiptoed around for weeks. She let out a soft breath, and I finally heard it, the sigh I'd been waiting for, the release of tension, of hesitation, of unspoken questions. Her eyes met mine, clear and unwavering now, and I saw the same recognition mirrored there, that the connection between us wasn't fleeting or imagined. It was quiet, insistent, and entirely ours. Without thinking, I reached out, letting my hand hover for a moment above hers. She didn't pull back. She let me touch her fingers lightly, a small, deliberate contact that carried more weight than any declaration could. I felt her warmth, the subtle tremor of her pulse beneath my fingertips, and I knew she felt it too. The inevitability of this closeness, earned through moments of hesitation, confession, and raw honesty. We sat like that for a while, hands touching, eyes meeting, occasionally drifting away, then returning. No words, nothing forced, just the acknowledgement that whatever this was, whatever it had been building toward, it had found its place in the quiet space we shared. She leaned back slightly, letting her head brush against the top of the chair, and I found myself matching her movement, our bodies settling into a rhythm that didn't demand more than what the moment allowed. For once, the world outside the store didn't matter. The rain, the city, the past regrets, they all fell away. I realized that love didn't have to arrive with fireworks or declarations. It could be small, deliberate, and tender. A shared glance, a lingering touch, a moment of understanding that didn't require words. And that was enough. She gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile, as if confirming everything I already knew. I squeezed her hand once, softly, and she returned the gesture, letting it linger just long enough for both of us to know. This was real, and we could stay here, in this quiet understanding, without rushing toward labels or promises. Eventually, we pulled back slightly, still close, still aware of each other's presence, and the world outside seemed less urgent. The bookstore was quiet, the fading light gentle against the shelves. I could feel her calm, her confidence tempered by vulnerability, and I realized I didn't need to speak to solidify what had been established. We simply existed there, together, as if we'd always belonged in that fragile, earned space. And in that silence, in the absence of grand declarations, I understood everything. Some connections don't need words, they just need to be felt. We stayed like that, hands almost touching, hearts quietly acknowledging each other, and it was enough. It's been weeks since that quiet afternoon in the bookstore, and yet the memory lingers, like a soft echo that never quite fades. I catch myself smiling at the smallest things, the tilt of a chair, the smell of old paper, the way sunlight hits the windows at just the right angle, and I realize how much has changed, quietly, imperceptibly, in both of us. She moves through her world differently now, not less guarded, but less burdened. I see it in the way she lets her laughter linger, in the little pauses where she used to rush past moments. She carries her past heartbreak with grace, but no longer as a wall between her and the people who matter. I've learned, just by being near her, that love doesn't always roar. It can breathe softly, carefully, and still leave an imprint that lasts forever. As for me, I've learned patience in ways I never expected. I've learned to notice the details, to read the spaces between words, to let someone's presence be enough without trying to claim it. I've learned that sometimes the most profound intimacy doesn't require bold gestures. It's found in silence, in shared glances, in the quiet knowledge that you belong somewhere without needing to say it aloud. We still spend hours in that bookstore together, hands brushing occasionally, smiles shared over coffee and half-finished sentences. Nothing about it feels rushed or forced. There's a rhythm now, gentle and unspoken, one we both understand. A touch of a hand, a subtle nod, a quiet glance across a table. These moments say more than any grand confession ever could. Sometimes I think about the first time our hands met, and I marvel at how much that single, fleeting contact taught me. How much it shaped everything that followed. How it quietly guided us towards something real, something earned. It wasn't fireworks or dramatic declarations. It was small, deliberate, patient. And that's why it feels unshakable now. I know life will continue to throw challenges our way. There will be moments of doubt, of awkwardness, of fear. But there's a foundation here, laid carefully, one we both helped build. And every time I see her, or catch that faint tremor of a smile, I remember how fragile and powerful human connection can be, and how lucky I am to have learned that lesson with her. So I carry it forward, not as a story of perfection, but as a story of discovery, of patience, of letting someone in and trusting the quiet currents that guide you. It's not always easy, but it is always worth it. And if you've been with me this far, if you felt the tension, the hesitation, the quiet pulse of something almost forbidden, I hope you understand what I've come to know. Some moments don't need to be shouted to matter. They just need to be felt. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?